My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 46 years old, and for 5 years, I believed my mother was slowly disappearing from me. 3 days ago, I took her to a geriatric specialist because she had started shaking at the kitchen table and could not remember how to swallow her oatmeal. I thought the doctor was going to tell me what everybody else had been saying for years, that dementia had taken another piece of her and that I needed to prepare myself. Instead, Dr. Lena Whitaker closed the exam room door, lowered her voice, and said, "Miss Carter, your mother isn't losing her mind. Someone is keeping her confused." I didn't understand those words at first. I just sat there with my purse in my lap and my mother's cardigan folded over my arm, staring at a woman who had just taken 5 years of grief and turned it into a question. Because 3 weeks before that, on my mother's 80th birthday, my brother Marcus had pressed a stack of house sale papers across our kitchen table, put a pen near Mama's hand, and told me she didn't remember enough to matter. If you have ever taken care of somebody you love and still had your own family treat you like you were the problem, stay with me. And before I go any further, let me know where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels, because I used to think families only broke this way in private. Ours broke in my mother's kitchen. The house sat on a quiet street in Savannah, Georgia, shaded by 2 old magnolia trees that dropped leaves on the porch no matter how many times I swept. My father bought that house in 1978, back when the neighborhood was still full of teachers, postal workers, church ladies, and men who fixed their own cars on Saturday mornings. Mama used to say the house had good bones and stubborn windows. Both were true. By the time I moved back in, the kitchen was the center of everything. Not because it was pretty, though it had once been. The yellow paint had faded near the stove, the cabinet handles were loose, and one corner of the linoleum curled no matter how many times I glued it down. But that was where Mama still seemed most like herself. Every morning, I got up at 5:30, before the school cafeteria opened, before the buses started growling down Abercorn Street, before the sun pushed gold through the curtains. I would check Mama's pill organizer, warm water for her tea, cut her toast into small squares, and set a folded towel under her chin because she hated feeling like a patient. Mama's name was Evelyn Carter. In that neighborhood, people used to call her Miss Evelyn, and they said it with the kind of respect you earn by feeding half the block without ever asking who could pay. She made peach cobbler for funerals, pound cake for new babies, and chicken and rice for anybody who had been left by somebody they loved. Before the confusion got bad, she could tell the difference between nutmeg and cinnamon by smell alone. She could hear a pie crust crack from the next room. She could look at a bowl of batter and say it needed 2 more turns with the spoon. Then she started forgetting burners on, then names, then whether my father had died or was just late from work. Then one evening, I found her standing in the pantry with a can of peaches in both hands, crying because she could not remember what she had come in there to find. That was the night Marcus told me I was being dramatic. Marcus was 4 years older than me, the kind of man who wore pressed shirts to family cookouts and called everything a situation, when what he really meant was inconvenience. He had a real estate license, a nice watch, and a way of talking slowly when he wanted you to feel stupid. Aunt Denise was my father's younger sister. She carried a Bible in her purse and judgment in her throat. She could make cruelty sound like prayer if you gave her enough time. For the first year after Mama's diagnosis, they visited just enough to have opinions. Marcus would stop by after church, kiss Mama on the forehead, ask me if I was keeping up with the documents, then leave before dishes needed washing. Aunt Denise came on Thursdays with casserole dishes and warnings. She said things like family had to make hard choices, and I had always been too soft where Mama was concerned. Maybe I was soft. I won't pretend I wasn't. I left my job as a full-time elementary school teacher and took a cafeteria manager position because the hours were easier to build around Mama's appointments. I stopped dating. I stopped going to choir rehearsal. I stopped making plans that required me to be more than 20 minutes away from the house. My life became pill times, bath days, doctor forms, grocery lists, and little yellow sticky notes I placed around the kitchen so Mama could still feel in control. The one thing I never touched without asking was her recipe tin. It was an old square tin with faded peaches painted on the lid, dented on one side, rusted just a little near the hinge. Mama kept it on the second shelf above the flour canister. Inside were index cards in her handwriting, newspaper clippings gone soft at the folds, and scraps of paper with measurements that made no sense unless you had stood beside her at the stove. No recipe in that tin was exact. A little mercy of salt. Butter the size of your patience. Bake until the kitchen smells right. That was my mother. She measured by memory. On good days, I would take the tin down and read cards to her while she sat by the window with her shawl over her shoulders. Peach cobbler, I would say, holding up the card. Sometimes her eyes would brighten. Sometimes she would only stare. But I kept doing it because love, after a while, becomes less about results and more about refusing to let the person disappear without a witness. Her 80th birthday fell on a Sunday. I planned it small because Mama got overwhelmed by too much noise. I baked a simple vanilla cake, not her peach cobbler because I could never get the crust right without her correcting me. I put on the blue dress she used to wear to church, brushed her silver hair back from her face, and dabbed a little rose lotion on her wrists. She smiled when she smelled it. Not fully, not the old Evelyn smile that could make a room behave, but enough to make my chest hurt. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late with a bakery cake still in its plastic box. Aunt Denise came behind him carrying a folder. That folder should have warned me. At first, they acted normal. Marcus kissed Mama's cheek and told her she looked beautiful. Aunt Denise said the Lord had blessed us with another year. We sang happy birthday, though Mama only moved her lips on the last line. I cut the cake into small pieces, and Marcus checked his phone 3 times before I had even poured the coffee. Then he cleared his throat. He said we needed to discuss the future while everybody was calm. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming behind him. I remember Mama's fork resting untouched beside her plate. I remember Aunt Denise sliding the folder toward the center of the table like it was something holy. Marcus had found a buyer for the house. He said the market was strong. He said the neighborhood was changing. He said it would be irresponsible to wait until Mama's condition got worse and the house became a burden. He said selling now would allow us to put her in a proper memory care environment, the kind with trained staff and locked doors and brochures full of smiling old people who never looked scared. I told him we were not discussing this on Mama's birthday. He looked at me the way he always did when I failed to accept his version of reality. This is exactly why we have to discuss it now, he said. Aunt Denise placed her hand over mine. Her palm was cool and dry. She told me love sometimes meant stepping aside before resentment poisoned the well. That was how she talked. Like she had swallowed a church bulletin and sharpened the edges. I pulled my hand away and asked Mama if she wanted more coffee. Partly because she liked coffee, partly because I needed to remind everyone at that table that she was still there. Mama looked at me, then at Marcus, then at the folder. Her mouth trembled. She tried to say something, but only a small breath came out. Marcus opened the folder. There were preliminary sale documents inside. Not a full closing packet, but enough to start the process. Enough to let a stranger walk through our rooms with a measuring tape and decide what our grief was worth by the square foot. He pushed a pen toward Mama. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. Don't you dare put that in front of her. Marcus didn't raise his voice. That was the thing about him. He knew calm could look like innocence if the other person got emotional enough. He said Mama had already agreed in principle during one of his visits. That was impossible. Mama had not been clear enough for a conversation like that in months. Some mornings she still knew my name. Some afternoons she called me by my grandmother's. Once, she asked me whether my father had fed the dog, and Daddy had been dead for 9 years. Marcus turned to Aunt Denise and sighed, like I had become a weather problem. Then he said the sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. Mama doesn't remember enough to matter. The room went still. Mama's eyes filled with tears. Not confusion. Tears. Real, present, wounded tears. Her hand moved across the table, slow and shaky, until her fingers touched the edge of the folder. For 1 second, I thought she was pushing it away. Then Marcus reached over and held her wrist. Not hard. Not enough for anyone to call it violence. Just enough to guide. Just enough to make it look like help. I stepped between them and moved the folder out of reach. Aunt Denise said I was making a scene. I told her maybe a scene was exactly what this family needed, because everybody had gotten far too comfortable whispering around my mother like she was already gone. Marcus's expression changed then, only for a second. The calm cracked. Underneath it, I saw anger, not grief, not concern. Anger that I had interrupted a process he expected me to obey. He stood and walked toward the cabinet where Mama kept her recipe tin. I don't know why he reached for it. Maybe he wanted to prove a point. Maybe he wanted to remind me that everything in that kitchen would eventually be packed, priced, and discarded. Maybe he was just cruel in the casual way. People become cruel when they think they have already won. He took the tin down and turned it over in his hands. We'll have to clear out all this old junk before the showing, he said. Mama made a sound. It was small. barely more than air caught in her throat. But I heard it, because I had spent 5 years learning the language of her smallest sounds. Her fingers curled around my sleeve, tight, stronger than they had been in weeks. I looked down at her. Her eyes were locked on the tin. Not on Marcus, not on the papers, on the tin. Then she whispered something I could not understand. Marcus laughed softly and said that was what he meant. She was mixing up birthday cake with old recipes now. Aunt Denise murmured that we should not embarrass Mama by forcing her to participate in things beyond her. But Mama kept staring at that tin like there was a fire inside it. I walked over to Marcus and took it from his hands. He told me I was being ridiculous. Maybe I was. Maybe to anybody else it looked like a tired daughter snatching a rusty old box away from her brother during a family argument. But the second I put that tin back on the kitchen table, Mama's hand loosened from my sleeve, and she closed her eyes like she had been holding her breath underwater. If your family has one old object everybody else sees as junk, but you know it carries a whole life inside it, tell me about it. Because that day, I still thought Mama was reacting to a memory. I did not know she was reacting to evidence. Marcus gathered the papers, but he did not leave. He stood in my mother's kitchen, buttoned his suit jacket, and told me he would be back with a formal plan. He said if I kept blocking reasonable decisions, he would have no choice but to ask the court to review whether I was fit to keep managing Mama's care. Aunt Denise looked at me with pity so practiced it felt rehearsed. She said, "Baby, you built your whole life around being needed. That doesn't mean you're doing what's best." I wanted to throw them both out. I wanted to scream. Instead, I cleaned cake crumbs from Mama's plate and told them the birthday was over. After they left, the house seemed to sag around us. Mama sat in her chair by the window, still wearing her blue dress, still smelling faintly of rose lotion. The recipe tin rested on the table between us. Outside, a neighbor's wind chime moved in the late afternoon breeze. I knelt beside her and asked if Marcus had scared her. She looked at me. For a moment, her eyes were clear. So clear I almost stopped breathing. Then she lifted one trembling finger and tapped the lid of the recipe tin. Once. Twice. Then she whispered, so softly I had to lean close enough to feel her breath on my cheek. 2 cups, she said. 1 pinch. 2nd brick. I smiled because I thought she was trying to remember the cobbler recipe. I kissed her hand and told her we would make it together when she felt better. But Mama did not smile back. She looked past me, toward the old brick fireplace in the sitting room, and tears slipped down both sides of her face. That was the first time I wondered whether my mother was not forgetting. Maybe she was trying to tell me something, and maybe the rest of us had stopped listening. That night, I did not sleep. I kept seeing Mama's finger tapping the recipe tin. Once. Twice. Then that whisper that did not belong to any version of the peach cobbler recipe I knew. 2 cups. 1 pinch. 2nd brick. I told myself not to turn it into something bigger than it was. When you care for somebody with memory loss, your mind starts playing tricks on you. You learn to build meaning out of fragments because fragments are all you get. A word. A look. A song lyric hummed under the breath. A hand reaching toward a drawer. Sometimes it means something. Sometimes it is only the disease throwing old memories into the air like torn paper. But Mama had not looked lost when she said it. She had looked afraid. After I got her changed out of the blue dress, I helped her into her soft nightgown and settled her into the hospital bed we had placed in the front room 2 years earlier. I hated that bed. I hated the metal rails, the remote control clipped to the side, the waterproof pad tucked under the sheet. I hated how one piece of furniture could change a living room into a waiting room. But Mama liked being near the kitchen. She said, back when she still had more good days than bad, that if she had to forget the world, she wanted to forget it somewhere that smelled like butter. I crushed her evening medication into applesauce the way I always did. But my hand paused over the pill cup. One tablet looked different. It was small and pale yellow, oval-shaped, with a faint line down the middle. I knew Mama's pills the way other people knew their children's shoes by the doorway. Blood pressure pill, white and round. Vitamin D, tiny and soft. Sleep aid, only on rough nights and only half, because the last time she had a full dose she spent the next day floating somewhere I could not reach her. This yellow pill did not belong. I picked it up between my fingers and held it under the lamp. Maybe the pharmacy had changed manufacturers. That happened sometimes. Maybe I had missed a note. Maybe Marcus or Denise had mentioned it, and I had been too angry to hear. That was how tired people gaslight themselves. We do the work for everybody else before they even open their mouths. I checked the prescription sheet taped inside the cabinet. No yellow oval pill. I checked the bottles. Nothing matched. Then I remembered Aunt Denise had come by Friday afternoon with a grocery bag and told me she had picked up Mama's refill because I looked like I needed one less errand. At the time, I thanked her. That memory made my stomach tighten. I did not give Mama the yellow pill. I tucked it into a small plastic bag from the drawer where I kept rubber bands and twist ties, sealed it, and wrote the date on the outside with a black marker. Then I gave Mama only the pills I recognized. Her eyes followed my hands the whole time. "Mama," I said softly, "did Aunt Denise give you something different?" She blinked once. "Now, I need you to understand something. We did not have a formal blink system like people in movies. Mama was not fully locked in. She could speak some days, forget words on others, and lose the thread of a sentence halfway through. But over the years, we had built our own language. One blink often meant yes, a long look away meant no, or tired, or please stop asking, because I cannot find the words. That night, the blink came sharp. Intentionnel. I asked if Marcus had brought the pills. She stared at me. I asked if Denise had. One blink. Then her mouth moved. For a second, no sound came out. Then she whispered, "Don't sell." I froze. The house creaked around us. Somewhere outside, a car passed, slow down the street, bass humming through the windows. I leaned closer, afraid if I breathed too hard, I would scare the words back inside her. "I won't," I said. "I promise." Her fingers moved against the blanket, weak and restless. "Tin," she whispered. I put it back on the table. "No." Her face tightened with effort. "Second. Brick." There it was again. A reasonable person would have checked the fireplace right then. Maybe I should have. Maybe part of me already knew that if I looked, I would find something I was not ready to carry. Instead, I smoothed her blanket and told her we would talk in the morning. She closed her eyes, but tears slid into the soft folds beside her nose. I sat beside her until almost 2 a.m, watching her sleep without that yellow pill in her body. She was still confused, still frail, still my mother in a fog, but the fog seemed thinner. Her breathing was steadier. Her hands did not twitch the way they often did after her evening dose. That was the first night I let myself think the ugliest thought. What if Mama's condition was not only getting worse? What if somebody was helping it get worse? The next morning, Marcus called before 7. He let it ring. He called again while I was spooning grits into Mama's bowl. Then Aunt Denise called. Then Marcus texted me a message so long it came in 3 gray bubbles. He said he had spoken to a lawyer. He said my behavior at the birthday had raised concerns. He said refusing to discuss long-term planning could be interpreted as neglectful. He said I needed to stop making decisions from fear. I read it twice, then put the phone face down. Mama sat in her chair near the window, wearing her pink robe, the recipe tin on the table in front of her because I had not had the heart to put it away. Her spoon rested untouched in the grits. "You need to eat a little," I told her. She looked at the tin. I opened it, thinking maybe the smell of old paper and cinnamon would soothe her. Inside, the cards lay in uneven stacks, some tied with faded ribbon, some loose. Mama's handwriting curled across them in blue ink, big and graceful, the kind of handwriting schools no longer teach. I found the peach cobbler card. 2 cups sliced peaches, I read aloud. 1 cup sugar. 1 pinch salt. Mama's eyes moved from the card to the sitting room. The fireplace. I felt the back of my neck prickle. The old fireplace had not been used in years. Savannah winters rarely demanded it, and after Daddy died, Mama said fires made the house feel too quiet. It was brick, painted white, with a narrow mantel where she kept framed photos, a ceramic angel, and a little brass clock that had stopped at 4:17, sometime during the pandemic. Second brick. I walked over and crouched in front of it. "Naomi." Mama said my name. Not baby, not her sister's name, not Mama's own mother's name. My name. I turned around so fast my knee hit the hearth. She looked terrified. Not confused. Terrified. That was when I stopped pretending I could handle this alone. I called Dr. Patel first, Mama's regular doctor, but the receptionist told me he was booked out for 3 weeks. When I said it was urgent, she offered to put me on a cancellation list. I hung up with my hands shaking. Then I remembered a name from the caregiver support group I had stopped attending, because Marcus said those meetings made me dramatic. A woman there had once mentioned Dr. Lena Whitaker, a geriatric specialist who took complicated cases. I called her office expecting voicemail. A nurse answered. I do not know what I sounded like, but within 10 minutes she had asked me about Mama's medications, recent changes, who had access to her pill organizer, whether there had been sudden worsening after family visits, and whether I felt safe bringing Mama in without notifying the rest of the family. That last question made my chest go cold. She told me to come in at 2:30. I packed Mama's cardigan, the yellow pill in its little plastic bag, her medication list, the birthday papers Marcus had left behind by mistake, and the peach cobbler card because I could not explain why, but I knew it mattered. Getting Mama into the car took almost 40 minutes. She was weaker in the afternoons, and every movement had to be slow. Her left knee buckled when she stood, and she gripped my forearm so hard her nails left little half-moons in my skin. While I buckled her seatbelt, she looked at the house. "Don't let him," she whispered. "I won't. Promise twice." That nearly broke me. "I promise," I said. Then I swallowed and said it again. "I promise." Dr. Whitaker's office was not in a big hospital. It was in a brick medical building near a pharmacy and a dentist, the kind of place with artificial plants in the hallway, and a receptionist, who smiled like she had seen every kind of family emergency, but had learned not to react too quickly. Dr. Whitaker was maybe in her early 60s, with gray hair pulled back, square glasses, and the calmest hands I had ever seen. She did not talk over Mama. She did not ask me questions as if Mama were furniture. She sat in front of her and said, "Mrs. Carter, I'm Lena. Is it all right if I talk with you for a little while?" Mama looked at me. I nodded. Mama blinked once. Dr. Whitaker noticed. I saw her notice. For the next hour she did not perform miracles. She asked simple questions. Some Mama missed. Some she answered halfway. Some she answered with startling clarity, then drifted away again. She knew her name. She knew mine. She thought the year was wrong by 6, but she remembered the name of the street where she had lived for more than 40 years. She could not draw a clock correctly, but when Dr. Whitaker asked what she used to bake on Sundays, Mama whispered, "Peach cobbler if the fruit was sweet enough." The doctor looked at me then, just briefly. Not with alarm, with attention. I handed over the medication list and the yellow pill. Her face did not change when she saw it, but something in the room did. She asked where I found it. I told her. She asked who prepared the pill organizer. I said I did. Except sometimes Aunt Denise picked up refills, and sometimes Marcus came by when I was at work. She asked whether Mama's confusion worsened at specific times. I said evenings were bad, especially after certain visits. Dr. Whitaker wrote all of this down. Then she asked to speak with me outside while a nurse stayed with Mama. In the hallway, I expected reassurance. I expected the usual careful phrases. Disease progression. Caregiver fatigue. Difficult transitions. Families under stress. Instead, Dr. Whitaker held Mama's chart against her chest and said, "I don't want to frighten you, but this pattern does not look like natural decline alone." The hallway seemed to tilt. What does that mean? It means I need blood work, a medication screen, and access to her prior records. It also means I do not want you giving her any medication you cannot personally verify. I showed her Marcus's sale papers. She read the first page, then the second. When she got to the signature line where Mama's name had been typed under a blank space, her jaw tightened. "Has your mother signed anything recently?" "Not with me present." "Has anyone pressured her to?" I thought of Marcus holding Mama's wrist. Just enough to guide. Just enough to make it look like help. "Yes," I said. The word came out smaller than I expected. Dr. Whitaker looked through the glass panel toward the exam room. Mama sat inside with the nurse, hands folded in her lap, staring at the cardigan I had placed over her knees. "When someone is cognitively vulnerable," the doctor said, "the most dangerous person is not always the stranger. Sometimes it is the person who knows exactly when she is weakest." I felt something inside me go quiet. Not calm. Not peace. A different kind of quiet. The kind that comes when fear has finally found a shape. The doctor sent us for labs that afternoon. Blood work. Urine screen. A medication review. She requested records from Dr. Patel in the pharmacy. I signed every release she put in front of me. For once, signing papers felt like protecting Mama instead of surrendering her. Before we left, Dr. Whitaker placed her card in my hand. "If anyone asks," she said, "this was a routine second opinion. Do you think my family is hurting her?" She did not answer fast, and I respected her for that. "I think your mother is trying very hard to tell you something," she said. "And I think you should listen before anyone convinces a court that she has nothing left to say." On the drive home, Mama slept with her head turned toward the window. The late afternoon sun moved across her face, catching the fine lines around her mouth, the silver at her temples, the small scar above her eyebrow from when she slipped in the garden 10 years earlier and laughed all the way to urgent care. At a red light, my phone buzzed. Marcus. Then Denise. Then a text from Marcus. We need to talk tonight. Do not make this harder than it has to be. I looked at Mama. Her eyes were closed, but her lips moved. I thought she was praying. Then I heard it again. Second brick. This time, I did not tell myself it was only dementia. This time, when we got home, I parked in the driveway, helped Mama inside, and placed the recipe tin on the kitchen table like it was something alive. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes every floorboard sound like a warning. I settled Mama into her chair, locked the front door, and walked to the fireplace. The white paint on the bricks was chipped in places. I ran my fingers along the lower row, then the second. Most of them felt solid. One did not. It shifted under my hand. My breath caught. Behind me, Mama began to cry. Not loud. Not helpless. Almost relieved. I pressed my palm against the loose brick. And for the first time in 5 years, I understood that my mother's memory had not been the only thing hidden in that house. I almost pulled that brick out right then. My fingers were on the edge of it. Mama was crying behind me. The recipe tin sat open on the kitchen table. The peach cobbler card turned face down like it had been waiting years for me to finally understand. Then someone knocked on the front door. Not a polite knock. Not a neighbor checking in. 3 hard hits, spaced out like whoever stood there wanted the whole house to know they had a right to enter. Mama made a small sound behind me. I froze with my hand still on the brick. The knock came again. Naomi, Marcus called through the door. Open up. I stayed crouched at the fireplace for 1 more second, staring at the loose brick like it was a mouth about to speak. Then I pushed it back into place as quietly as I could and stood. Mama's eyes followed me. I whispered. Not yet. She shook her head, barely. I didn't know if she meant don't open the door, don't trust him, or don't leave the brick. With Mama, one gesture could carry 3 meanings and break your heart with all of them. I closed the recipe tin, slid the peach cobbler card under a stack of mail, and walked to the front door. Marcus stood on the porch with Aunt Denise behind him. He wore a navy blazer even though the evening was humid enough to make the magnolia leaves shine. Aunt Denise had her church purse looped over her arm and that solemn face she used when she had already decided you were wrong but wanted credit for patience. Now is not a good time, I said. Marcus looked past me into the house. That's exactly what you said Sunday. And Saturday. And last month. It's never a good time when grown people need to talk. I kept one hand on the door. Aunt Denise softened her voice. That was always the first move. Baby, we're not here to fight, we're here because we love your mama. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because there are phrases families use so often they stop meaning what they say. We're here because we love her. We just want what's best. Don't make this harder. You're too emotional. All of them sounded clean until you saw what they were covering. Marcus lifted a folder. A new one. My stomach dropped. I spoke with Attorney Wilkes this afternoon, he said. If you keep refusing to... I stared at him. You mean you can try to have me removed? I mean we can ask the court to make sure Mama is protected. Behind me, I heard the soft scrape of Mama's chair. I turned my head enough to see her trying to stand. No, Mama, I said. Stay seated. Marcus caught that. His eyes sharpened. She's agitated, he said quietly to Aunt Denise, like he was narrating evidence. You see what I mean? That was when I understood the trap. If I raised my voice, I was unstable. If Mama got upset, I was upsetting her. If I refused papers, I was obstructing care. If I asked questions, I was paranoid. Marcus had built a room where every door led back to the same accusation. Naomi is the problem. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door halfway closed behind me. We went to a doctor today, I said. For the first time that evening, Marcus did not answer immediately. Aunt Denise's lips pressed together. What doctor? Marcus asked. A specialist. Why wasn't I informed? Because I'm her caregiver. You are not her only family. No, I said. Just the one who knows what pills she takes. The words landed. I saw Aunt Denise blink. Marcus's face stayed smooth, but his jaw moved once, the way it did when he was grinding his teeth. He told me that was exactly the kind of accusation he was worried about. He said stress was making me suspicious. He said caregivers often developed control issues when they refused outside help. He said he had read about it. Of course he had read about it. Marcus always found language that made cruelty sound like concern. Aunt Denise reached for my arm, but I moved back. "Naomi, listen to me," she said. "You have given years to your mother. Nobody is denying that. But sometimes the Lord sends other people to loosen our grip when we're holding too tight." I looked at her hand. The same hand that had brought groceries. The same hand that had delivered medication I had not checked closely enough. The same hand that now trembled just slightly beside her purse. "Did you pick up Mama's refill last week?" Her expression changed so fast most people would have missed it. "I pick up many things for this family." "That's not what I asked." Marcus stepped between us. "Enough," he said. "You're not interrogating Aunt Denise on the porch like she's some criminal." I wanted to tell him about Dr. Whitaker, about the yellow pill, about the loose brick, about Mama saying my name in a voice so clear it felt like a hand reaching out of deep water. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Marcus had arrived too quickly after the appointment. Maybe it was Aunt Denise's tiny flinch. Maybe it was Mama, inside the house, staring toward the kitchen like she was trying to warn me through walls. So I said less than I knew. "I'm not signing anything." Marcus's patience finally thinned. "You may not have a choice much longer." Then he did something I did not expect. He reached into the folder and handed me a photocopy. It was not a sale document. It was a typed statement, already drafted, saying that I had become overwhelmed by caregiving responsibilities, and agreed that placing Evelyn Carter into a licensed memory care facility would be in her best interest. Below that was a blank signature line with my name typed under it. My hands went cold. "You brought me a confession." "I brought you a way out," he said. Aunt Denise nodded, eyes sad and empty. "You don't have to keep drowning to prove you love her." For 1 second, the sentence got under my skin. Because I was drowning. That was the cruelest part. They had chosen a lie that brushed up against the truth. I was exhausted. I was lonely. I had stood in the grocery store some nights holding a carton of eggs and forgotten why I was there. I had cried in the car outside the pharmacy because the woman in front of me complained about waiting 10 minutes, and I wanted to ask her what she knew about waiting 5 years. But exhaustion did not mean I had stopped loving my mother. And it did not mean Marcus got to sell her life while she was still inside it. I folded the paper and handed it back. "Leave." Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not kindly. "Attorney Bell sent Mama another letter months ago," he said. "Did she ever show it to you?" The name hit me like a dropped plate. "Howard Bell?" Marcus's smile widened just enough to tell me I had reacted. Aunt Denise turned her head sharply toward him. That was my second clue. Marcus had said too much. "Why would Mr. Bell write Mama?" I asked. Marcus slid the statement back into his folder. "Maybe if you had kept up with the mail instead of playing martyr in the kitchen, you'd know." Then he turned and walked down the steps. Aunt Denise lingered a second longer. Her face had gone pale beneath the powder. "Naomi," she said softly. "Some doors are closed for mercy." I looked at her. "No," I said. "Some doors are closed because somebody is hiding behind them." She left without another word. I locked the door and stood there until their car pulled away. Only then did I let myself move. Mama was sitting exactly where I had left her, but her whole body seemed tighter, folded inward. I knelt beside her. "Howard Bell," I said. "Do you remember him?" Her eyes filled again. "One pinch," she whispered. I did not know whether that was yes. I searched the kitchen first. The junk drawer, the stack of church bulletins, the old basket near the phone where Mama used to keep coupons she never clipped. Nothing. Then I searched the small writing desk in the sitting room. Daddy had bought it for Mama the year I graduated high school. She used to sit there every December with her address book and send Christmas cards to people who had not sent one back in 10 years. The top drawer held stamps, dried pens, old eyeglass cases, a rubber band ball, and 3 birthday cards she had forgotten to mail. The bottom drawer was stuck. I tugged it once, twice, then harder. It opened with a wooden groan. Inside, beneath a stack of expired insurance papers, was a manila envelope. Howard Bell's letterhead sat in the upper left corner. The envelope had been opened. I knew I had never seen it. My hands shook as I pulled out the letter. "Dear Mrs. Carter, pursuant to our previous conversation regarding the river parcel rights attached to the property at..." I stopped reading. River parcel rights. I had lived in that house half my life and had never heard those words. The letter went on to say that because of recent inquiries made by an unnamed real estate representative, Mr. Bell strongly recommended that Mama review her estate instructions and confirm whether Naomi Carter had been Formally added as protective representative in the event of diminished capacity or undue family pressure. Undue family pressure. The phrase sat on the page like it had been written in red. There was also a handwritten note at the bottom. Evelyn, if Marcus raises the sale again, do not sign anything until we locate Franklin's original packet. He told me you would know where the sweetness is kept. Franklin was my father. I read that line 3 times. Where the sweetness is kept. My eyes moved to the kitchen. The recipe tin. I was still holding the letter when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then a text appeared. Aunt Naomi? It's Lila. Please don't tell Dad I texted you. Lila was Marcus's daughter. 17 years old, quiet, always watching adults the way children of controlling parents learn to watch weather. Another message came. I heard him talking to someone. I recorded it because he scared me. Then an audio file appeared. I stood there in Mama's sitting room, Howard Bell's letter in one hand, my phone in the other, and pressed play. At first there was static. Then Marcus's voice, muffled but clear enough. She's not going to sign if Naomi keeps hovering. Denise needs to handle the medication schedule better. A man's voice I did not recognize said something too low to catch. Marcus again. Once the old woman signs, Naomi can scream all she wants. The buyer doesn't care about family drama. The room went silent after the recording ended. I could hear my own heartbeat. Mama made a sound behind me. I turned. She was looking at me with an expression I had not seen in years. Not confusion. Recognition. I walked to her slowly, afraid of what my face might show. Mama, I said, holding up the letter. Daddy hid something, didn't he? Her lips trembled. Tin, she whispered. I brought it to her. She touched the lid with 2 fingers. Then she looked toward the fireplace. Second brick, she said again. This time, the words were not broken. This time, they were instructions. I wanted to go straight to the hearth, pull the brick out, and see whatever my parents had hidden from us, from Marcus, maybe even from themselves. But Dr. Whitaker's warning rang in my head. If Marcus was already talking about court, if Denise had handled medication, if there was a buyer waiting and a lawyer's letter hidden in Mama's desk, then whatever sat behind that brick was not just family history. It was evidence. I called Howard Bell's office, expecting an answering service. He answered himself. His voice was older than I remembered, rough around the edges. But when I said my name, he went completely quiet. Naomi, he said after a moment. Is your mother safe? Not how is she? Not what can I do for you? Is your mother safe? That question told me everything. I don't know anymore, I said. He exhaled slowly. Then listen carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not let your brother remove your mother from that house. And if Evelyn has pointed you toward anything your father left behind, do not open it alone. I looked at the fireplace. Why? Because if Franklin did what I think he did, Mr. Bell said, your brother has been trying to sell more than a house. The line seemed to hum in my ear. Before I could ask what that meant, headlights swept across the front windows. A car had pulled into our driveway. Then another. Mama gripped my wrist with a strength I did not know she still had. Through the curtains, I saw Marcus step out first. Then Aunt Denise. And behind them, a man in a gray suit carrying a leather portfolio. Mr. Bell was still on the phone. Naomi, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. Tell me they are not there. I could not answer. Because Marcus was already walking toward the porch with a key in his hand. The key slid into the front door. I had forgotten Marcus still had one. It was from before Mama got worse. Back when family came and went with porch food, borrowed ladders, and Sunday leftovers. Back when a key meant trust. Now it sounded like a threat. The deadbolt turned halfway before the chain caught. Marcus pushed once. The door opened 3 inches and stopped. His face appeared in the gap, calm as a man arriving for a meeting he had already won. Naomi, he said. Take the chain off. Behind him stood Aunt Denise, holding her purse tight against her ribs. The man in the gray suit waited 1 step lower on the porch, leather portfolio tucked under his arm, eyes moving over the house like he was already measuring it. I still had Mr. Bell on the phone. Who is with him? Mr. Bell asked. I kept my eyes on Marcus. Who is that? Marcus smiled without warmth. Mr. Wilkes, counsel. Since you refuse to have a reasonable conversation, we're going to document the condition of the home and Mama's care environment. My fingers tightened around the phone. Mr. Bell's voice sharpened in my ear. Do not open that door. Aunt Denise leaned close enough that I could smell her perfume through the gap. Baby, this is for your protection too. If everything is fine, Then let us see that everything is fine. That was the trick, wasn't it? Abusers love inspections when they design the checklist. Behind me, Mama made a sound. Not fear this time. Effort. I turned. She had pushed herself up from the chair and was gripping the armrest, her whole body trembling. The recipe tin sat on the kitchen table. The fireplace waited in the sitting room. The loose brick seemed to burn in my mind. Marcus saw her over my shoulder. There, he said softly. You see? She's distressed. Open the door before you make this worse. I put the phone on speaker. Marcus Carter. Mr. Bell's voice came through, old but steady. This is Howard Bell. You will step away from that door. The change in Marcus was small, but I saw it. His eyes narrowed. The confidence did not leave him, but it shifted its weight. Howard, he said. This is a family matter. No, Mr. Bell answered. It became a legal matter the moment you brought documents to an impaired woman's birthday party. The porch went silent. Aunt Denise looked down. Mr. Wilkes adjusted his portfolio and took half a step back, which told me he had not known the whole story. Men like Marcus often arrived with professionals who had only heard the clean version. Marcus's voice lowered. You are advising Naomi now? I'm advising Evelyn Carter, Mr. Bell said. And I'm advising everyone present not to enter that house without permission. Marcus stared at me through the crack. For the first time in years, I did not look away. We can do this at my office tomorrow morning, Mr. Bell continued. Dr. Whitaker will be present. So will Mrs. Carter, if she is willing and medically able. Bring whatever you think gives you authority. Aunt Denise whispered something to Marcus. He ignored her. And if Naomi hides or destroys property before then? He asked. Mr. Bell's reply came cold. Be careful what you accuse people of when I still have your father's file in storage. Marcus went still. That sentence did more than all my shouting ever could have done. He stepped back from the door. This isn't over, he said. No, I told him. It's finally starting. They left, but I did not move until the headlights disappeared. Then my legs nearly gave out. Mr. Bell stayed on the phone while I locked the deadbolt, slid a chair under the knob even though I knew it was ridiculous, and helped Mama back to the table. He told me not to open anything alone. I told him Mama had been saying second brick all day. On the other end, he went quiet. Then he said, Put me on video. It took me 3 tries because my hands were shaking. When his face appeared on the screen, he looked older than I remembered, with white hair, heavy eyelids, and the kind of expression lawyers get when they have spent decades watching families turn inheritance into war. I set the phone on the mantel and aimed it at the fireplace. Mama sat behind me with the recipe tin in her lap. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Bell said gently. Evelyn, do you understand what Naomi is about to look for? Mama lifted her head. Yes, she whispered. One word. Small, cracked, but whole. Mr. Bell closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were wet. All right, he said. Naomi, show me the brick before you remove it. I crouched in front of the fireplace. The second brick on the lower left had a faint chip shaped like a crescent moon. I pressed my fingertips along the edge and pulled. It slid forward with a soft scrape. Behind it was a narrow space wrapped in dust and old air. Inside sat a small oilcloth packet tied with butcher's twine. I pulled it out carefully and placed it on the coffee table. Mama began to cry again, but this time the sound was not fear. It was release. Inside the packet were 3 things. A brass key no longer than my thumb, a sealed envelope with my father's handwriting, and a folded copy of the peach cobbler recipe, older than the one in the tin, with numbers written beside certain ingredients. 2 cups peaches, 1 pinch salt, 4 tablespoons butter, 17 minutes to rest. 2, 1, 4, 17. The clock on the mantel had stopped at 4:17. Daddy and Mama had built a map out of ordinary things. Ingredients, a broken clock, a brick in a fireplace, sweetness hiding in plain sight. Mr. Bell told me to put everything back into the oilcloth and bring it to his office first thing in the morning. But Mama reached for the envelope. Her hand shook so badly I had to help her hold it. On the front, Daddy had written, "For Evelyn and for Naomi. If the day comes when love is not enough protection." I wanted to open it. I did not. For once in my life, I waited. The next morning, I dressed Mama in her cream blouse and the pearl earrings Daddy gave her on their 35th anniversary. She was tired, and there were moments when the fog rolled back in and she asked if we were going to church. But when I placed the recipe tin in her lap, her fingers closed around it. Dr. Whitaker met us at Mr. Bell's office. She did not bring drama with her. She brought records. Lab results. A medication list. A printed statement about Mama's fluctuating cognition and her concern that improper medication management may have worsened Mama's confusion. Mr. Bell's office smelled like paper, lemon polish, and raincoats. There was a long conference table, framed degrees on the wall, and a window overlooking a parking lot where Spanish moss hung from the trees like gray lace. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late with Aunt Denise and Mr. Wilkes. He stopped when he saw Dr. Whitaker. "What is she doing here?" Dr. Whitaker looked up from her folder. "Protecting my patient." Mama sat beside me, the recipe tin on the table in front of her. Marcus looked at it, and for the first time, I saw fear in his face. Not guilt, fear of losing. Mr. Bell began calmly. He said no property discussion would happen until Evelyn's capacity, safety, and prior estate instructions were clarified. Mr. Wilkes tried to object, saying he represented Marcus's interest in a potential petition. Mr. Bell let him speak for exactly 30 seconds before placing Daddy's envelope on the table. Then he opened it. My father's letter was only 2 pages. But it changed the room. Daddy wrote that he had grown concerned about Marcus's pressure on Evelyn regarding the house. He wrote that the house itself was not the main asset. Attached to the property were partial rights to a riverfront parcel purchased decades earlier by my grandfather and never properly developed. Those rights had become valuable because a private buyer had been quietly assembling land for a luxury development. Marcus did not look surprised. "That told me everything," Mr. Bell continued. Daddy had left instructions that if Evelyn's health declined, or if any child pressured her to sell, Mr. Bell was to locate the original protective packet. In that packet was a signed statement from Evelyn, executed when she was still fully competent, saying she did not want the home sold while she was alive unless Naomi was present, represented, and in agreement. Aunt Denise muttered. Franklin always favored her. Mama turned her head slowly. "No," she said. Everyone looked at her. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were clear. He trusted her. The words landed so hard even Marcus had no answer. Mr. Bell laid out the next document. A durable power nomination. Not active automatically, but naming me as Evelyn's preferred protective representative if undue family pressure or impaired decision-making became an issue. I covered my mouth. For 5 years, Marcus had called me too emotional, too controlling, too attached. But Daddy and Mama had seen something before I did. They had known the person who stayed might one day need legal protection from the people who only visited with plans. Marcus leaned forward. "This is sentimental nonsense. None of this proves Naomi is fit now." Dr. Whitaker opened her folder. "No," she said. "But this does." She explained Mama's medication inconsistencies, the unverified yellow pill, the timing of cognitive drops after certain visits, and the fact that Mama showed stronger recall when removed from the usual medication pattern. She was careful. She did not accuse beyond her evidence. That made every word heavier. Mr. Bell placed the pharmacy receipt on the table. Aunt Denise's name was on it. Denise's face drained. "I was helping," she said. Dr. Whitaker looked at her. "Then you should be able to explain why the medication you picked up was not on Mrs. Carter's active list." Denise opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Marcus stood. "This meeting is over." Mr. Bell did not raise his voice. "Sit down." Marcus laughed once. "You don't order me around." "No," Mr. Bell said. "But the recording your daughter sent Naomi might change your appetite for walking out." That was when Marcus stopped looking like my brother. For a second, he looked like a man cornered by his own voice. I did not want to play Lila's recording. I hated that a 17-year-old girl had been pulled into adult greed. But Marcus had built his whole case on my instability, Mama's silence, and the assumption that nobody would have proof. So I pressed play. His voice filled the conference room. "She's not going to sign if Naomi keeps hovering. Denise needs to handle the medication schedule better." Then the next line. "Once the old woman signs, Naomi can scream all she wants. The buyer doesn't care about family drama." Aunt Denise began whispering prayers under her breath. Marcus stared at the table. Mr. Wilkes closed his portfolio. "I was not aware of this recording," he said quietly. "Of course he wasn't." Mr. Bell turned to Mama. "Evelyn, I need to ask you something, and if you cannot answer today, that is all right." Mama's hand found mine under the table. He asked whether she wanted the house sold. Mama's face tightened with effort. For a terrifying moment, I thought the fog would take her before the answer could reach us. Then she looked at Marcus. "No. Just one word. But it filled the room. Mr. Bell asked whether she wanted Marcus or Denise handling her medication or legal papers. No. He asked whether she wanted me to remain in the home and continue helping protect her interests while the court reviewed the evidence. Mama turned to me. Her eyes softened. Yes. I bowed my head because I did not want Marcus to see me cry. But he saw. Maybe that was good. Maybe he needed to see what it looked like when love survived his paperwork. The rest happened in careful legal steps, not movie thunder. Mr. Bell said he would file an emergency petition to halt any property transfer and request review of possible elder exploitation and undue influence. Dr. Whitaker agreed to submit her medical statement. Mr. Wilkes withdrew from participating in any sale discussion until the matter was reviewed. Denise was told not to pick up, handle, or administer any medication for Mama. Marcus finally spoke. You don't understand what I owe. There it was. Not grief, not concern, debt. Mr. Bell looked at him with something almost like pity. No debt gives you the right to erase your mother. Marcus's mouth twisted, but he said nothing. For years, he had made me feel small because I cried easily, because I smelled like cafeteria food after work, because I still lived in our mother's house, because I kept old recipe cards and labeled pill boxes, and believed a woman could be fading and still matter. But in that conference room, surrounded by documents, lab results, a recipe tin, and the one word my mother still had strength to say, I understood something. Marcus had never been stronger than me. He had only been louder in a language the world respected. Money, property, paperwork, authority. Now Mama had those things too. And she had memory. Not all of it. Not every day. Not enough to satisfy people who think a person only matters when their mind performs on command. But enough. Enough to say no. Enough to choose. Enough to lead us back to the brick. As we left Mr. Bell's office, Mama asked me to open the recipe tin. I thought she wanted to hold the card, so I placed it in her lap. She ran one finger over the old handwriting. Then she whispered, "Too much cinnamon." I laughed before I cried. Because it was such a small thing. Because it was such a huge thing. Because 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had said Mama did not remember enough to matter. But Mama had remembered exactly enough to save us. People think truth arrives like a storm. They imagine doors flying open, sirens in the street, somebody falling to their knees while everyone finally sees what they did. Sometimes that happens. Most of the time, truth arrives with paperwork, forms, statements, medical records, certified copies, phone calls from people who say they are sorry, but they need one more signature before anything can move forward. The week after that meeting in Mr. Bell's office, my life became a stack of folders on the kitchen table. Dr. Whitaker filed her report. Mr. Bell filed an emergency petition to stop any transfer of the house or the river parcel rights. The pharmacy turned over records, showing Aunt Denise had picked up medication that was never supposed to be in Mama's active routine. Lila's recording was preserved by Mr. Bell, and I made sure that child's name stayed out of as much as possible. She had already done more than any 17-year-old should have been asked to do. Marcus did not get arrested that day. Life is not always that clean. But he did lose the thing he wanted most: control. A temporary order stopped him from entering the house without permission. Aunt Denise was barred from handling Mama's medications, appointments, or documents. A court-appointed advocate came to the house twice, spoke with Mama, spoke with me, and reviewed Dr. Whitaker's findings. For the first time in 5 years, somebody official sat across from my mother and waited for her to answer. Not Marcus. Not Denise. Not me trying to fill the silence because I was afraid the world would mistake slow for empty. Someone waited. And Mama answered what she could. Some answers came clear. Some drifted. Some never came at all. But nobody rushed her. Nobody translated her into convenience. Nobody said she did not remember enough to matter. That alone felt like justice. The medication changes were not magic. I need to be honest about that. Mama did not wake up one morning as the woman who used to run 3 church committees, bake 12 pies before noon, and remember everybody's birthday without writing it down. She still forgot things. She still called me by my grandmother's name, some evenings. She still cried when the sun went down too fast because twilight confused her. Some days, she could tell me exactly how Daddy proposed to her outside a hardware store in 1969. Other days, she asked me if my father would be home for supper. But the fog changed. It lifted in places. Dr. Whitaker adjusted her medications, removed what should never have been there, and built a care plan around keeping Mama steady instead of keeping her quiet. We added a nurse 3 mornings a week, I joined the caregiver support group again. This time, when Marcus called it dramatic, I did not hear his voice in my head as truth. I heard it as noise. The investigation took longer than my anger wanted it to. Marcus had debts. More than I knew. Bad investments. A failed development deal. Private loans from men who did not send polite reminder letters. The buyer for the house was connected to the riverfront project, and Marcus had been promised a commission large enough to save himself if he could deliver Mama's signature before anyone asked too many questions. Aunt Denise said she thought she was helping the family. That was what she told the advocate. That was what she told Mr. Bell. That was what she told herself, I think. She said Marcus was under pressure. She said I had become possessive. She said Mama needed peace, and maybe a memory care facility would have been better anyway. She never said the word money, unless someone else said it first. But she stopped looking me in the eye. That told me what I needed. The house stayed ours. Not because I won some grand battle in one dramatic moment, but because Mama and Daddy had prepared a shield out of old papers, old love, and an old recipe tin nobody thought to respect. Mr. Bell found the rest of Daddy's original packet in storage. There were notes about the river parcel, copies of early offers Marcus had never mentioned, and a letter Mama had written years earlier when she was still fully herself. It was addressed to me. I waited 3 days before reading it. Not because I did not want to know. Because I knew once I opened it, I would hear her voice from a time before the fog, and I was not sure my heart could hold both versions of her at once. When I finally opened it, I sat at the kitchen table after Mama had gone to bed. Naomi, baby, if you are reading this, it means something has gone wrong in a way I hoped it never would. I know your brother. I love him because he is mine, but I know him. He sees value in what can be sold. You see value in what can be saved. Do not let anybody convince you that saving is weakness. I had to stop there. I put the letter down, pressed both hands over my face, and cried so hard I scared myself. For 5 years, I thought I had been holding on to Mama because I could not let go. But maybe some part of her had been holding on to me too, through recipes, through broken phrases, through a brick in a fireplace, through sweetness kept where only love would think to look. 3 months after the hearing, I stood in the kitchen with a contractor, a health inspector, and a woman from the city business office who had the driest sense of humor I had ever heard. I was opening a bakery. Not a big one. Not the kind with exposed brick walls and $12 cupcakes. Just a small counter built into the front of the house, with a separate entrance, morning coffee, biscuits, tea cakes, and peach cobbler on Fridays. I named it Evelyn's Tin. The first morning we opened, I put the old recipe tin on a shelf behind the counter. Not where customers could touch it, just where they could see it. The faded peaches on the lid looked softer under the new lights, less like rust and more like survival. Mama sat by the window in a blue cardigan, a blanket over her knees. Dr. Whitaker said too much stimulation might tire her, so we kept it quiet. A few neighbors came. My old cafeteria staff came before their shift. Mr. Bell came with flowers and pretended not to get emotional when Mama recognized him. Lila came too. She stood in the doorway for almost a full minute before stepping inside. I had not seen her since everything happened. Marcus was staying with a friend across town while the legal process crawled forward, and Lila had been living mostly with her mother. She looked thinner, older. That is what family secrets do to children. They steal softness before it's time. I walked around the counter and hugged her. She stiffened at first, then held on. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I pulled back and made her look at me. "You did not do this. He's my dad. And you told the truth anyway." Her eyes filled. Mama looked over from the window. For a second, I wondered if she knew Lila. Then she lifted one hand and motioned her closer. Lila went to her slowly. Mama touched the girl's wrist. "Brave," she said. That was all. But it was enough. The first peach cobbler came out of the oven at 11:30. I had made it before dawn, following Mama's card exactly. Or as exactly as anyone can follow a recipe that says butter the size of your patience. I sliced the peaches thin. I chilled the butter. I rolled the crust twice because the first one tore. I added cinnamon, nutmeg, lemon, sugar, and the smallest pinch of salt. The kitchen smelled like my childhood. Like church fans and porch chairs. Like my father laughing with flour on his shirt. Like Mama humming while rain tapped the window. Like every version of us that had existed before greed got a key to the front door. I carried a small bowl to Mama. She looked at it for a long time. Then she took one careful bite. I waited. I don't know what I wanted. Approval maybe. A sign. A miracle small enough to fit on a spoon. Mama swallowed, looked at the bowl, then looked at me. Too much cinnamon, baby. The room went blurry. I laughed. Then I cried. Then Mama laughed too, just a little. And that made everyone else in the bakery pretend to look at the floor because some moments are too private even when they happen in public. Marcus used to say Mama did not remember enough to matter. But Mama remembered the cinnamon. She remembered the brick. She remembered no. She remembered me. And maybe that is the thing I want you to understand. A person does not have to be perfectly whole to deserve protection. They do not have to perform their memories on command to have dignity. They do not have to be easy to care for before their voice counts. Sometimes love means staying. Sometimes love means getting help. And sometimes love means standing in a lawyer's office with shaking hands and saying no, on behalf of someone the world has decided is too weak to say it alone. 6 months later, Evelyn's tin had a line out the door every Friday morning. Not because I was the best baker in Savannah. I still burned biscuits if I tried to answer the phone and check the oven at the same time. But people came for the story. And then they came back because the cobbler got better once Mama started correcting me from her chair. Marcus eventually pled to financial exploitation-related charges and agreed to a settlement that removed him from any authority over Mama's property or care. Aunt Denise avoided harsher consequences by cooperating, but she was not allowed near Mama without supervision. I did not celebrate either outcome. That surprised me. I thought justice would feel like fireworks. Mostly, it felt like putting down a bag I had carried so long I forgot my hand was numb. One evening after closing, I found Mama sitting with the recipe tin in her lap. The sun was low, turning the kitchen gold. Flour dust floated in the air. The house was quiet in a way that no longer scared me. I sat beside her. She ran her fingers over the faded peaches on the lid. "Saved it," she whispered. I did not know if she meant the tin, the house, herself, or me. So I said, "Yes, ma'am." "You did. And that is my story. I cared for my mother for 5 years while my family told me she was too far gone to know what was happening. They tried to sell her house, silence her voice, and make me look like the unstable daughter who could not let go. But my mother had hidden the truth in the one place they never respected. Her recipes. If you have ever been called difficult for protecting someone you love, I hope you remember this. Sometimes difficult is the only reason the truth survives. And if there is an old object in your family that still carries someone's voice, do not be so quick to throw it away. It might be holding more than memory. It might be holding the way home.